It is 7 o'clock. The meeting will come to order. I'm Grace Lesperance, Cascade Township Supervisor. We'd like to note that Trustee Shipley will be arriving around 7:15. Clerk Slater, please call the roll.
Treasurer Pierce.
Here.
Trustee Kessel.
Here.
Trustee McDonald.
Here.
Trustee Nordhook.
Here.
Clerk Slater, here. Supervisor Lesperance.
Here,
Thank you.
please rise if possible for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to
Allegiance to
the
the
flag
flag
of the
of the United States of America
and to the
and the
republic
republic
for which it stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and justice
justice
for
for
all.
all. Is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Support.
It's a motion by Trustee Kessel, supported by Trustee McDonald to approve agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have one presentation this evening. And before we begin that, I want to note that the PFAS Community Forum that we mentioned earlier is scheduled for April 19th at 6 o'clock p.m. Details will be available soon. And Manager Swayze, you've got information on the fire station #1. Please proceed.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask if Stephanie and Hunter can pull up our presentation. Great, thank you. So we are circling back with the Township Board now. I know all of the board members were able to attend the public presentation that we had back in January, and we'll talk about that throughout this as well. But that was really a presentation to roll this information out to the public, to give them an idea of what we've been studying over the past year, and to get their feedback. And now what we are doing is combining the work that we had done before with the work we've done with the Public Safety Advisory Committee and the public input that we got, and circling back with a recommendation to the Township Board. So I'm going to serve as a sort of master of ceremonies tonight for this particular presentation. And you will also be hearing from Jim Holman, who is the lead from Progressive AE on this study. Of course, you'll be hearing from Chief Majors, and you'll be hearing from Stephanie Fast, our Assistant Township Manager, in regards to the public input that we received as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If we can go to the next slide, please. So again, agenda quite similar to the presentation that we saw about a month and a half ago. So we're going to review the facility study that was completed in 2019, talk a little bit about the township growth curve. We have our facilities assessments and prioritization that we utilize to figure out what was the most important items for the township to consider. Then we're going to go through the site selection process and the operational ramifications from the sites that we looked at. The design process that we went through and the recommended design for a new fire station. A temporary operations plan for responding in fire station #1's area if we do in fact choose to demolish the current Township Hall Station 1 and rebuild on the current site. The financial considerations for the rebuilding of Station #1, what a project schedule might look like, some comparative station projects throughout the state. We got our presentation again that was completed in January 2001, and we will review the public input that was part of that presentation, and the recommendations from the staff going forward based on all of the information that we have. So if we can go to the next slide, I'm gonna talk just briefly about the facility study, and Jim from Progressive will get into that in a moment. But on the next slide, you can see that we did our community engagement. It was very clear that Station #1 should be the top priority for the township. And that's why we spent so much time figuring out how we are going to deal with fire station #1. You can see that there are other facilities that were considered in there as well. Township Hall, with that project will conclude as we move into the new Township Hall facility next week. The Cascade Township Park facilities, and then so on and so forth. But very clearly, fire station number 1 was the top priority in the community. We can go to the next slide. So township growth, just to give you a little background information on the township growth over the past couple of years. Going to the next slide, you can see the population growth starting in 1970. In 1980, we were at 10,120 people. That's when we moved into the current Station 1. 1990 bumped up to 12,896. Throughout the late 80s and early 90s, we started adding more staff to the fire station, and eventually turned to a full-time staff or a combined department where we had both full-time staff and paid on call staff in the mid 1990s. Up to 2000, our population then 15,107. That was really when we began building station number 2 to improve our responses on the east side of the township. And then up till 2010, in that time frame, we passed an additional millage in the township to actually pay for the staffing of that station as well. So it's anticipated that when the 2020 census comes out, our population will be close to 20,000. The estimates right now that I believe are low, 19,406. I think we'll see that number up above 20,000 when the official numbers are out. And then the West Michigan Regional Planning Commission anticipates, based on our previous growth, that our population could be north of 24,000 going up to 2030. So, population of 10,120 in 1980 when we moved into station number 1, and then 2020 approaching basically doubling what that population was at that point. Can we go to the next slide? So now we're going to talk about the facility studies and the prioritization that we did. And I am going to turn it over to Jim to talk a little bit about more about these slides.
Thank you, Ben. So this slide is about fire station number 1 and the overall condition assessment of the building itself. We've covered this, so I don't want to reread it to you all. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. But overall, the condition rating is low. It has issues being positioned behind Township Hall with safety concerns. There's a lack of visibility. There are mechanical systems that are not adequate anymore. The staff living quarters are cramped, and Chief will talk on more on that a little bit. And then really the ability of firefighters to navigate safely in the case of an emergency is compromised. So that was the assessment on the station condition. On the next slide, we've really pulled forward again, based on our investigation, observation, interviews, and the community input, several community input sessions. We really have, again, the ranking of the fire station as number 1 as a priority. And then you can see below 2, 3, and 4 are listed, but Station 1 has been the focus ever since the public engagements for the past 2 years. And then on the next slide, we have the additional building area that really is being outgrown by the growth curve that Ben cited, and it doesn't meet all of the building codes that are really for promoting safe use of the building in an emergency situation. There's not a safe separation for the visitor entry. The vehicular and pedestrian traffic, again, is compromised in that location. And again, the staff living quarters are undersized. The apparatus bays are too low and too narrow for the trucks. We've mentioned in the past that when the trucks pull in and leave, at times we pull the mirrors in just to make them fit. And then the mechanical systems are not adequate. So those are the issues of the station. And then on the next slide, Chief has comments on this one as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I think this slide just kind of focuses on, I guess, some examples of how cramped it can get at Station 1. Some of the things we're looking at, if you have to decontaminate after a structure fire or a medical call, There's people waiting in line for showers. We've got limited shower facilities. There's no washer or dryer for contaminated uniforms, turnout gear, bedding, no sanitation or decontamination area for used medical equipment. We have a common bunk room, which for gender separation and virus protection, but also we don't have male or female restrooms. We have a common area. There's no locker room to change. So we really have some issues that were exacerbated this year, especially not only with the pandemic, but with just everything going on right now. I mean, we have a upstairs in our TV room. If you sit in a chair and watch TV, you're about 8 inches away from a treadmill and a set of weights. And so it's just difficult to operate in a station this small. So this is just I guess, indicative of kind of what day-to-day life is for some of our firefighters. Go ahead, next slide.
This slide, the previous slides were about issues with the station. This slide is about opportunities. So Station 1 needs additional building area to provide that safe environment, like we were just describing. The relocation of the Township Hall provides for station expansion. And this is a property that's owned by the Township and is currently being used for emergency services. So that's a positive. This station, while it has more limited visibility from 28th Street, is ideally situated to really serve a greater area. So the positive and the negative of this is really a net positive for the property itself. Identifying alternate locations was challenging because in the end, under B, did reduce the overall coverage of the area, and one of the sites did decrease visibility and access.
Thank you, Jim. So now that we've reviewed the facility study that was done, the next step in the Fire Station 1 process was to figure out where the possible locations were for a station number 1 to be located. So I'm going to turn it over to Chief, and he can talk about some of the pre-work we did to figure out what locations might be available, and then to kind of review each one of the general locations that we landed on and what some of the pros and cons of those locations were.
Great, thanks, Ben. Yeah, next slide. Okay, so in the evaluation process, Township administration and the fire department analyzed dozens of parcels based on the possibility of housing a fire station that would be adequate to fill our needs. And so out of those dozens of parcels, we had some of the prerequisites we were looking for was size. It had to have a certain amount of acreage. It had to be in a location that was accessible from north, south, east, and west, was located in Station 1's district in order to have adequate coverage of calls, specifically with NFPA 1710, which is kind of what our standard is on trying to get to our emergency calls. So after we drilled down and vetted out those processes, we came down to 3 specific properties that were feasible and possible based on a number of criteria. So we'll go through those really quick. The first one is the Thorn Hills Avenue property, which is where we are at right now. The other one would be Charlevoix Drive and 28th Street. And the third would be Charlevoix Drive and Orchard Vista. So this one right here, Charlevoix Drive and Orchard Vista. Real quick, some pros of this is there's plenty of acreage. It is for sale, and it does increase our response time to an area where we typically run a lot of calls in our hotel district and our 28th Street commercial district. Some of the quick cons on that is high acquisition cost. It's in the several $1 million range to acquire this property. There would be some delays with response times. It's a boulevarded residential speed zone street. Delayed response to support Station 2, pulling us a couple minutes farther to support Station 2's area and that crew that only has 2 firefighters. NFPA 1710 standards, that 4-minute response pulls us out of a couple of critical neighborhoods. So the Berger, Goodwood, Rec Park neighborhood, Manchester Hills, Beard, Montreux, Thornapple River Drive up the river near kind of Windcrest. Those are all areas where we can access right now in that 4-minute response zone, which is what we're looking for. If we chose this site, that would pull us out of that. So ultimately, that's why we're not recommending this site. Too many cons. Next slide. This one here, Charlevoix Drive and 28th Street. There's some good to like about this site. It's got good public visibility. Everybody knows where the intersection of 28th and Charlevoix is. It adds primary coverage to their commercial industrial areas that we typically run a lot of calls to. There's no need for temporary coverage. If we decide to build there, we could operate out of Station 1 and build there. Some of the cons, it's a very small parcel. It is the absolute minimum we could squeeze a fire station on that would be adequate. So it'd be very cramped right away. High acquisition costs. It's not even for sale. So that would be something that the township would have to foot. There's a lot of traffic issues pulling out onto 28th Street. That is a treacherous place to pull directly out of or back into as far as emergency operations go. And again, it delays response to the south of the airport. You have to go east or west to get to Craft or Thornhills to get south or north. And the 1710 standards in those critical neighborhoods are also an issue with that as well. So that's another reason why we chose not to recommend this site. Next slide. So where we're at right now. This is the Thornhill site. You can see there's more pros and cons. It is easy access north, south, east, and west. Thornhills can get south very easy. Obviously, 28th Street and Cascade Road gets us to those main veins of response. It's a 3-acre lot, which is ideal for a headquarters station for a combination-sized department like ourselves. What it does is it allows us to maximize our Kentwood mutual aid. So the pink area right there, and then the purple overlap area, that is Kentwood Engine 52's response area in that 4-minute zone that is that NFPA 1710 response. So you can see that combined with Kentwood and where we are currently, that gives us really good coverage for Cascade Township, specifically in an area that is our busiest area. So that is ideal. Couple of cons, if we choose to build here, it does require that we relocate for about a year while it is constructed. So that is an issue that we would have to work through. And it does rely on some mutual aid to cover the very west portion of that busy area along Patterson for Kentwood. So if Kentwood's unavailable, you're 30 seconds to a minute a little bit farther than you would be with the other sites. But ultimately, this is what we are recommending that the township goes with. So, next slide. I think, Jim, this is back to you or Ben.
You're correct.
Yep. So now that we went through the process of how we chose what site we're recommending to build a new fire station on, it's important now to go through the process and the recommendations we have for the fire station that we would like to build, how we came to these conclusions, what the process was, and what the recommendations are. So again, I'm going to turn it over this time to both Chief and Jim. Jim can talk about this process from a planning process. Chief can talk about it from an operations process.
Good, thank you, Ben. On the next slide, I want to acknowledge, first of all, that one of our partners who's a fire station programming expert is Redstone Architects. They helped us create the program, and Chief and staff put a really great amount of time, beneficial time into thinking through the needs of the future. And that's really what helped shape the programming. So you can see on the left of this slide, there is a public side to any fire station where the offices and the meeting space and the entry are. And then on the other side, where it's more fire operations, you have apparatus bay and equipment and the quarters, the living quarters. So when you look at that adjacency diagram, then on the right side are those spaces. So public and fire administration and fire suppression operations. So when we were finished programming, really the bottom line here is that area that we aggregated added up to just short of 18,000 square feet in a building footprint. So that's really what was straight out of the people who are going to use the building and maintain it and fight fires, and then have to house emergency response vehicles. So I feel that's again, a great effort on Chief and his team's part. On the next slide, what we did is we translated that programming into physical space. So for best practices with fire station design, and I'll have Chief talk through the hot and cold zones, but the upper part of this conceptual layout, this plan, is illustrating on the upper right, the public side where you would have entry, offices, and conference and training room space. On the left side of that upper bar is really the living quarters with, everything that the firefighters need during the day and during the night while they're in the building. The lower portion of this almost an L-shaped space in the purple is the apparatus equipment bay in the locker and changing room. So, and Chief, you can describe a little bit about how that's separated and why.
Yeah, so if you notice the, I guess the purple area there is what we call the hot zone. And this is one of Redstone's, I guess their styles of building their fire station. They do a lot of public safety buildings, and this is one thing they hang their hat on. So when we come back from a fire or a medical call and there's bloodborne pathogens or carcinogens or anything that we are contaminated with, which happens multiple times a day, into that, you pull into that purple zone, and then you're contaminated, you need to be cleaned. So in that, I guess, tan warm zone, those are appropriate facilities to decontaminate, not only clean yourself, your uniforms, your turnout gear, your medical equipment, and get clean so you don't track any of those carcinogens or contaminations or viruses, bloodborne pathogens, anything into the living quarters or the administrative or public side of things. So that is a concept that very much is utilized for most new fire stations now. It's an appropriate way to keep us safe, keep us healthy. And so that was important to us. Another thing too, a lot of people ask why 18,000 square feet. So on a typical fire station, you've got your small substations, you've got your big city fire departments. Cascade is a combination fire department. This is a combination fire department that has a headquarters station. So meaning this is where the fire chief goes. This is where the fire inspector goes, where fire administration goes. We have a fire marshal, fire inspector. It's where our training happens, and we have a conference room. These are where we have enough people to house full-time 24-hour suppression, but as well as accommodate paid on call that come in. So that's why you see a lot of those different offices. That is a headquarters station. We do have a small training room at Station 2, which is already too small to accommodate our current staff. And so for the next 50 years, you're gonna need to be able to accommodate a staff in a training area that is in the appropriate response area. So for example, right now we have about 1,500 calls in Station 1's district. We have about 300 calls in Station 2's district. And so for the hundreds and hundreds of hours we train a year, that's putting us several minutes out of district for the majority of our calls. So it's better serve the community if we are training at Station 1. Also too, this is going to serve as an emergency operations center. So in those big township emergencies where we have to set up an emergency operations center, this is where that would be. Right now, that's a difficult thing to accomplish. We have elementary school classes, American Legion, homeschool events, neighborhood associations, award ceremonies, press briefings. These are things that can happen in this training room. Right now, it's very difficult to secure space in the Wisner Center or any of these public areas where people can get together and meet and have these meetings. And so this would take care of that as well. We do a lot of community engagement that this will house as well. So that's where a lot of those different spaces will come in handy, and they're needed. And that's indicative of why we need 18,000 square feet in this particular station.
Thanks, Chief. On the next slide, we've taken this conceptual plan and we've adapted it to demonstrate the current fire station number 1 site. So you see on the left side, we've taken the property and outlined it and turned the property green just as an indicator for the extent of the property itself. We've put the proposed building location on there in white, basically pulling that plan from the last slide forward and placing it on the site. And then here's where we illustrate pedestrian access and traffic patterns for vehicles, where the public would park, and then where the station firefighters would park their private vehicles during the day and during the night when they're there. So with this layout, we have a pros and cons list, many pros and very few cons. As a matter of fact, the pros are this property, not only is it owned by the township, but it's well sized to take a station of this size with a couple of curb cuts to enable safe access, ingress and egress. One thing you note on here is the front apparatus apron on the right side of the building means the bay doors face straight out to the street. It'll be a great look from the street for visibility into the bays, but when the firemen and women are leaving, they'll be able to see out and clearly see the street to know if that left or right turn is safe upon exiting the property. Really, the cons of the property are more having to do with an existing radio antenna on the back corner, which is frankly not in our way, but we list it as a con because it's something we wouldn't normally place there, but it's not really a detriment to layout. Topography along the southern edge does start to drop off. So in a perfect site, you would want it flat. But we've found a way to deal with that where we are not placing a building in that location. And then the last one is temporary operation shift during. What this means is we're tearing down Station 1, which is in worse shape anyways, but in the interim, the fire station operates out of a different location. On the next slide, we've taken that site plan and we've added a little bit more detail. So what we have here, we've actually placed parking locations. So you can see the typical parking stalls in white lines on the darker gray colored zone. We've shown fire truck turning radiuses. So they pull in on the northeast corner of the property around the building and then pull straight into the apparatus bay for storage and for cleaning and then the turnout. So this is really located well because we also have a bypass lane on the southern edge of the building, which will be very handy for getting around the building. And that's just a good demonstration on how wide the site is and what that allows for. So we've indicated on here setback lines as well. So when we assess zoning, we know where the setbacks are for the 100-foot setback off of Thornhills and the side and rear yards as well. On the next slide, we've really just extruded that floor plan on the site for the building up into 3 dimensions so that while this is not design, this is a demonstration of the mass of the building and its scale. So we can get a sense for how big it'll be on the property. It's not a super tall structure, but it is better than what we have today for light access and for clear bay space. And then it interacts with the northern portion of public space and living quarters. So this is really just to give a better view to what the potential is for the site, but is prior to design. So we aren't there yet. And that really covers the conceptual design plans.
Great, thank you, Jim and Chief. So a lot of work went into designing the fire station on the current site. As we mentioned, we think that this is the best option from both a operational perspective and a financial efficiency perspective to locate our new station here. But as we mentioned in the cons, that does create another issue, which is we need to come up with a temporary operation plan. We have to continue to operate entirely during the construction timeline, which we'll get into a little bit later in the presentation. So I'd like to turn it back over to Chief again to talk about what our temporary operations plan would be during the construction time frame.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Next slide. Yeah, so this, we were able to locate a potential site for the year that we would be displaced from Fire Station 1. There's a site off of Air Cargo that is owned by the airport that is readily available for lease. It does have a door that would be large enough to accommodate a fire engine and a medical response vehicle with accompanying crews. So we could operate out of there and provide medical and fire coverage in Station 1's district west of the river within about 60 to 90 seconds just south of where we're at right now. So from a response standpoint, we got lucky that is available. That is what we recommend. It is the best temporary option by far. So some of the pros, it's readily available to rent, can house a fire engine, a medic, 4 firefighters, a chief, and an inspector. We'd rent for about a year and a half, depending on timelines. Again, best option. One of the cons, it does shift our response area 60 to 90 seconds to the south. But during our internal analysis, we do have, I guess, our busy times outlined where we can shift and post some crews temporarily during those busy times so we can have adequate coverage, especially when we're full staffed. We can have a medic crew or an engine crew shift north and soften that coverage a little bit. So we do have a very robust plan for the interim. 12 months we'll be able to get by just fine. But that is, the blue shows you the 4-minute response target that we have for that temporary facility. The green shows you Kentwood's four-minute mutual aid. The pink is Station 2's, and then the purple is overlap. So that gives you kind of an idea of where coverage would be for about a year. And that's showing without temporarily staging a crew somewhere. So we can increase that a lot to the north, depending on where we stage. Next slide. Jim, I think this goes back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did find during the study is that because of that temporary need for station relocation during construction of the main fire station, there is storage required for the extra apparatus and vehicles that would not be housed at station number 1. This is a station number 2 site plan that shows on the rear parking area a rectangle that we're proposing to place a building to store those vehicles in the short term. 70 by 45 feet is that box size. And then what we've done on the next slide is we've illustrated on the left immediate use for that year where we would put rescue vehicles, SUV, the generator trailer and engines, so that you would have multiple locations for rescue equipment during the construction of station number 1. I feel, as a resident, that's a really great move to disperse those for better coverage. And then on the right side, which may be even more important, is the long-term use of this building. We're out of room to store things now with our current size, let alone when we grow in the future due to increased residents and businesses. So this is a longer term plan of how the building could be used for reserve engines and SUVs and plows and spreaders and other additional storage and pallet rack locations. So we have a short-term use, and we've also thought through very well the long-term use with chief majors and the staff about what the future of this building would be for.
Great. So now we have our temporary operations plan, including both for station number 1 and looking at our outbuilding as well. So we might now need to talk a little bit about what all of this is going to cost the township. So Jim and I are going to talk a little bit about the financial considerations. First, Jim, I'd like you to kind of walk through this chart, kind of what the different categories of costs represent, and how these numbers came up with.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the top, you can see the square footage of the building. The footprint was 17,912 square feet. The top set of numbers, it's roughly 4 lines of numbers, really equate to the construction value total for the budget. And this is only a budget. There's been no bidding. There's no any other input from contractors or trade contractors. This is how we budget for fire stations. And you can see that the potential construction value on the low range to the high range is the 4.4 million to the 5.1 million total for construction, which gives, and Chief will actually hit on this a little bit later, the appropriateness of size and value in the square foot cost, $262 a square foot to $304 per square foot. Below that is the contingency category, where we definitely encourage our clients and the township especially to build in design contingency. So as you go through design, if we find something is needed, it's added in there. There's construction contingency if you find something during construction, so that you have the buffer that's needed to make sure that this can be built for the originally approved funds. And then there is escalation. It depends on what year you're building this as to how much construction costs. We do find that each year as time ticks away that the costs tend to go up. So we have an escalation value in there in case that's needed. So really with the contingency, it's a $5.2 to $6.1 million project roughly. Below that line is the soft costs. These are architectural engineering fees, reimbursable expenses, furniture, equipment, security, audiovisual equipment, anything that's a soft cost that the township would need to cover to fit that building out. And what we've done is we've used a 15 to a 20% escalation of the cost above and added that. So the total project cost is what we're most interested in making sure that's understood. And that is a $6.05 to $7.31 million project value.
Great, thanks, Jim. Hunter, I'm going to ask you if you can skip forward 2 slides, please. Let's go past the project schedules right now and go to the next financial slide. Yeah, thank you. So the Personnel and Finance Committee met over the past couple of months as we got these opinions of probable costs and tried to determine, okay, we have this cost, we got to build this station, how are we going to pay for it? And really, they've identified two ways to pay for this. The first is from our fund balances, both from our general fund and from our fire fund. So we're in the process of completing our fiscal year 2020 audit right now. In about 2 months, we will know kind of exactly what our fund balances were at the end of fiscal year 2020. We still have some revenues that are coming in, trickling in, and some payments that are going out. But based on the numbers we have right now, we think that general fund balance is going to be right around the $7 million mark. And the fire fund balance is going to be right around the $2.4 million mark. So there's certainly cash on hand for the township to be able to fund a part of this project. And what the Personnel Finance Committee is recommending is that in combination with other projects that are going on in the township in 2021, specifically the local road work that we're going to talk about later in this meeting, they want the township to pursue bond funding somewhere in the range of $4 to $6 million a year. And the way the bond funding works is that we'll start with the high number. There's a certain process that we have to go through with resolutions. And that resolution will initially state that the township is planning on bonding for up to $6 million worth of costs. And then as these numbers are finalized, as we go through this process and bids are taken, there's an opportunity to roll that back a little bit. So just because we say in the beginning that we're going to look at bonding at $6 million doesn't mean at the end the township actually has to bond that $6 million on this process. We're really only able to bond for the costs that we're able to identify. So the debt service to the township for $4 to $6 million for 20 years, the annual debt service would be somewhere between $270,000 and $400,000 a year. And that's based on an interest rate somewhere around 2%. Based on what we're seeing right now in the market, we think that we can get interest rate actually quite a bit better than that. A lot of communities with bond ratings such as ours, even lower than ours, our bond rating happens to be AAA, which is the highest bond rating you can get for a municipality. But we're hearing of municipalities that are in the AA area that are getting bond rates around 1 to 1.25%. So every percent, every little increment that we can lower that interest rate is savings for the township. So, and then just so you guys know, the anticipation is that all of this debt service is going to be paid from existing revenues. So we'll still work to determine which existing fire revenues and which existing general fund revenues that will be paid from. But there's no intention or no recommendation from the Personnel Finance Committee that there'll be any additional revenues, any additional taxes to pay for the projects that we are looking at bonding for. So Hunter, if you can go back 2 slides now to the schedule, and we'll have Jim talk a little bit about the schedule that we would need to look at in order to complete these projects.
Sure. So this slide shows the storage building that we described on station number 2's rear parking lot. The idea is to have this constructed and ready for use to store vehicles so that station 1 site can be used for demolition and construction. The start of this is certainly post this meeting and approval. So we used March as a starting date. Really where this hits fabrication is in July, and then occupancy when construction is complete in March of 2022. So this is what enables the main fire station project to really happen. On the next slide,
Jim, before we move on, can you talk a little bit about why that schedule is so spread out? I know we talked about that quite a bit during the process.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's been very interesting with the pandemic. If you were tracking buildings of this type and delivery of that type of steel, we were seeing 10 and 12-week lead times a year and a half ago. Within a half a year, we were seeing those lead times jump up to 16 weeks. And now when you contact those manufacturers who make these type of buildings, they're sitting at 24 to 26 weeks. So this schedule stretched explicitly because of the construction industry and the manufacturers of these buildings and their lead times now to procure those buildings and deliver them. And I can answer more on that too as we go back and forth. The next slide shows where this fits in with station number 1. You would start designing this after the storage building in May is the date or the month that we picked. And really, you would be able to take over the site when the storage building is available. So mobilization is in March of 2022 when the storage building is complete. So at that time, you transfer vehicles over to the storage building, and you can start to take down station number 1 and secure that site for construction in April. We have the rest of 2022 for construction into February of 2023, where construction would be complete with a March, so a 1-year completion for occupancy in 2023. So really the storage building is what enables it, but it also is the limiter for starting of mobilization in March of 2022.
Jim, if we were able to identify a temporary space to store equipment while the outbuilding was being bid, would there be an opportunity to push this schedule up at all?
Yes. That the simple answer is yes.
Great, thank you.
You bet. One thing that we did make sure is that we covered the amount of time the fire equipment is not outside or going through winter conditions. So that's been factored in here as well.
Great, thank you. All right, so if we can move on, we can skip the next slide. We have already covered it. So we're going to go to some comparative station projects. Of course, we want to see what other people are doing as well. We want to make sure that what we have designed makes sense in the context of what's going on in other places in the state. So I'm going to turn it back over to Chief. He did some research on what some other similar departments in the state are doing with their headquarters stations.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Yeah, we go next. Perfect. So I guess the closest one that I relate to would be Portage Fire Department. So Portage is a similar community of ours, similar demographics. The fire department itself is very similar to ours. They just completed a fire station this past year. It was being constructed in 19, finished in 20, at 18,000 square feet. At $6.1 million. And so that is in the range that we're looking at. They did a beautiful job. A lot of our design was mirrored with some of the ideas that they put in. So Portage Fire did a very good job. Monroe Fire at 15,560 square feet at the $6.4 million range, built in 19. Highland Fire's on target for a 14,000 square foot, 5.6 and a $7.6 million build. Dexter Fire is on target for a $7+ million build at 31,000 square feet. And then we also, so those are some local Michigan fire station construction projects that happened recently. We also analyzed every single fire station built in North America in 2020, and that was via the Firehouse Magazine Station Design Study. So they analyzed, I believe, 58 newly constructed fire stations in North America in 2020. The average size was 16,728 square feet at $6.628 million. So we're on target. We're right hitting in that median average range compared to what the construction industry with fire stations it has been happening in North America, specifically in Michigan. So those are some comparative projects that have been happening that are similar to our proposal.
Great, thanks. So when we concluded our public presentation in January, What we did was post the video and the study and all the information up on our website and went through a process to solicit additional input from the public. And I'm going to ask Steph now to chime in and talk a little bit about how that public input process went and what some of the input was that we received.
Thank you, Manager Swayze. The public engagement portion of this project was extremely important. We wanted to make sure that our community was aware of what we were doing and also able to let us know what they thought about the project. So we did hold a virtual public meeting on January 19th. And it was very well attended, and we had some good conversation with residents at that meeting. We also did provide a feedback survey for anyone who was not able to attend the meeting. And we publicized that with the survey so that people could turn in any input that they had. We also made sure we reached out to the public via our social media channels. We used organic posts, and we also used paid promotional posts. We did posts on our website. We sent every resident a postcard. We put it in our print newsletter, our e-newsletter, and we did do a press release. So prior to that January 19 meeting, that meeting was publicized. MLive picked it up digitally, and the Grand Rapids Press picked it up in print. So that gave us some extra public awareness that the meeting was occurring. And the survey results, could you go to the next slide, please? The survey results, mostly the survey questions asked if people understood what happened in the presentation, if they had any questions. But overall, the question as to whether or not they agreed with findings for a new fire station, overwhelmingly 92% of residents that responded said that they did support it.
Great, thank you, Steph. So in the packet that was published for the meeting tonight, we did include the full survey in there for people to read. Those results have also been posted on our website as well. And if you read through that, you did see that the results were overwhelmingly positive for the fire station. And the current concerns seem to be mostly about what was taking so long and that we should move forward with the project. So I was very encouraged to hear those things from the public, and wanted to thank Steph and the communications team for making sure the public had plenty of opportunity to weigh in on this project. So we can go to the next slide. So recommended next steps. How do we move this project forward? So there are two things that we're recommending. One item for tonight and one item for 2 weeks from tonight. So tonight, when we get into our new business, we are recommending a design build contract from Progressive for our Station 2 outbuilding project. You'll recall that Progressive was actually selected at the beginning of this when we started our facility study through an RFP process. We had several firms that bid on the project, and they were selected through that competitive process. We've been very happy with the work that they've done so far. So we will cover that when we get to our new business item. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll also be reviewing a design build contract from Progressive with their partner Redstone. Again, we talked about it a little bit earlier. When we moved Progressive through the project, we really wanted them to bring a subject matter expert on to help in the design process. And we would like Redstone to continue to be in that process as well. Not only was Progressive selected through an RFP process, but so was Redstone. We think they've been a great team so far, and we would like to carry them as well. So when we get to new business tonight, we'll start to talk about the first next step, which is the outbuilding project. So really, that is going to conclude our presentation for tonight. The way I kind of see this next part working is an opportunity for our board members to ask questions of myself or Jim or Chief or Stephanie about the presentation. And then I would recommend that if there is anybody in the audience that would like to ask questions, that the board consider taking questions and comments from the public as well.
I'll ask a question. Either Adam or Jim, probably Adam. Adam, this is gonna allow us to grow too. It isn't gonna be a situation where we get into the building and we have no room for growth. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're anticipating this building will serve us for the next 50 years, including whatever growth we have for Station 1's area, for sure.
Thank you.
Shipley has a couple questions. Chief, a couple things. First of all, I'm very supportive of the new station, but I do have some concerns. I've always been a watchdog on what you guys call contingency costs. I call it slush fund, but we'll move on from that. When you move into your temporary quarters down the airport, is there going to be some expenses at remodeling the inside of that building to fit your needs? For instance, the full-time crews?
Yes, sir. So we took a look at that and we had some estimates. In order to get it up to compliance, it's not going to take much. I think the estimate came back around $25,000 or less. There's a little bit of plumbing that needs to happen for to make an adequate kitchen for the crews. A little bit of electrical with some exit and egress lighting. There is some rated door assemblies that need to be installed. Obviously paint, carpet, things of that nature, a CO2 and NO2 detection system. So if you're going to park fire apparatus and vehicles in a building that you're going to be occupying, you need to have those as well. So there's some compliance issues, but not much.
Okay, those numbers are really minimal as far as I'm concerned. I was expecting you to come back and say, well, it's going to cost $100,000. Second question, Chief, the outbuilding at Station 2. Looking at the estimated cost, I just about croaked, but understandable that it's a special building. Do you plan on having, obviously, electricity in there? Is there going to be running water set out to the building along with drainage for the apparatus when it comes back in?
Yeah, so one of the things I guess with this outbuilding, it's not like a simple pole barn. It's got to be a building that can be secured to house apparatus. They got to be heated and warm. You got to have all of those facilities, electricity, all of the things that you would need in a typical apparatus bay, because we are going to be running out of their emergency at times, and it's certainly housing some apparatus that can't freeze, need to be plugged in, need to be monitored. So yes, it will have all of those amenities involved in that. So there, a lot of that expense is because fire apparatus need a lot of maintenance to keep them.
And if you're going to run the utilities out there from your existing Station 2, it's not going to be just a nickel or dime. It's going to cost some.
That's
You've
correct.
answered all my questions. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Don't call me sir.
Right. Sorry about that.
Any other questions or comments? All right, good job, gentlemen. Thank you. Article 5, public comments. We will now proceed to public comments. They are limited to 3 minutes. Deputy Manager Fast, before we take public comments in the audience, can you please read? I see there's some questions.
Yes, Supervisor Lesperance. The first comment came in from Zoom account, and it says, average pole barn outbuilding construction costs are much closer to $100 a square foot. Is there a reason why this design is over $135 a square foot? What elements could be value engineered to bring the cost down to the community and combat major cost increases in the construction industry that we are seeing right now?
So I can answer that if you'd like me to, Ben.
Please.
Thank you, Stephanie. What's nice is the chief just answered it. Actually, this is not a standard pole barn. This is a pre-engineered building that has services so that it's heated and it's appropriate for apparatus bay, from the size of the concrete slab that supports the vehicles to the way it's heated and the way it's secured. So it's a good value at that 130 mark, if that's what the number is. I didn't do the math real quick like this person did, but that would be the reason why this is a little bit different. And I would say costs have gone up in any construction from last year to this year. Like I mentioned earlier, the lead time has increased for these type of buildings, as has the material cost as well.
Okay, the next questions come from David Laughter, who would like to know what is being done to verify value engineering is being completed to ensure we are combating major increases in construction material costs. What is the design contingency, or why is the design contingency so much higher than the construction contingency? And will there be visibility into the design portion of the design build contract, especially since this will be awarded earlier? And then his last question is, what does Progressive AE see construction material costs doing at the end of 2021 into 2022?
So I'll go down and just go one by one on these. Value engineering is something that is actually, it happens when you finish designing a building and it bids out and the numbers don't match the budget. So our goal is to not have value engineering and to design it right with estimates as it's being designed, so that we hit the mark on the first try. So, and that typically is the case the way that we're delivering these projects. So the increase in construction materials is combated with not value engineering as much as it is the contingencies that we've talked about. And those are in the next question. I can answer that as well. Design contingency and construction contingency is typically 10% each. In this case, we know these building types so well that we said that the construction contingency could be placed at 5%. Since it's not designed, the site or the building is not designed at all, we have design contingency staying at 10%. But first and foremost, the goal of these projects is to not spend contingency. Those are there as a safeguard, backstop, in case something happens that's out of any of the extended team's control, but is not to spend those funds. So with that, as design goes along the design path, and we have the project better understood, those contingencies decrease from 10% to 8% to 6%, whatever is appropriate, until we do not need to carry design contingency anymore. So that's how design contingency is not used and how it's whittled down as you know more about the design of the project, which currently we don't have any design. So that's the take on contingency. The question then led to what is material costs possibly leading into the end of this year into next year. And we typically account for a 3% increase in material costs for this coming year. That's a little crystal ball look, but the way the pandemic has been going and the way it's affected the construction industry, they are really busy with construction. Materials have been in short supply. So if anybody's tried to buy wood at any of the lumber yards, you'll know what I mean by that cost. So they have been going up. And they're not listed anymore, so I can't see if there was another one, Stephanie, or not.
Nope, you covered them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fast, are there any other hands raised in the audience?
There are no further hands at this time, Supervisor Lesperance.
Okay, thank you. That concludes this portion of public comment. Article 6, approval of consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Shipley makes motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So
Slater.
motion by trustee Shipley to approve the consent agenda, seconded by clerk Slater. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Article 7, for financial actions, we have the tax collection report of 2020. Is there a motion or discussion?
I have a comment if that helps.
I just can't tell who's,
Ken's done a fantastic job at this year after year, and I'd like to commend him and his staff.
thank you. Article 8, unfinished. Do we have any unfinished business tonight? Hearing none, we will proceed. Moving on to Article 9, new business. First up, item 23, 2021, building and grounds equipment replacement purchases. Mr. Swayze, who do we have to present the board with this?
I'll be presenting this to the board tonight. So every year we replace on a schedule any equipment in our buildings and grounds department that's scheduled to be replaced. And this year we have 3 categories of items that are scheduled to be replaced. As we have done in the past, we've gotten quotes for these pieces of equipment through the state purchasing program. So the nice part about that program is that the state actually goes through the RFP process and gets these companies to put in the best price possible to be able to purchase this equipment. And then since we're able to use the state purchasing program, we know that the bids have been put out accordingly. So we have 3 categories that we're looking to replace this year. The first one is our Bobcat. So we replaced the Bobcat on a 10-year schedule. We replaced one a couple years ago using general fund funds. This Bobcat is scheduled to be replaced utilizing DDA and pathway funds because the Bobcats are used just as much on our pathways and our DDA as they are in other general fund supported areas as well. So that's the first one. The quote for the Bobcat replacement is $60,870.29. The second item is our grandstand mowers. So we replace our grandstand mowers on a 10-year replacement schedule as well. 2 of them are scheduled to be replaced this year. Those are, the budget for those was $16,000. Quote came over a little bit more, $17,930. However, I think we'll be able to bring that down because that quote does not include the trade-in of our current grandstand mowers. And then for the Groundmaster, this is actually a 20-year piece of equipment to be replaced. We had budgeted $20,000 for that. And the quote is $17,844. That does include the trade-in of our current piece of equipment. So the infrastructure committee reviewed these purchases and has recommended that the township board approve the replacement of the various buildings and grounds equipment.
Thank you, Manager Swayze. Is there board discussion?
I have a comment to make. The infrastructure board looked at this pretty closely. And one of the positive things is Bobcat is going to roll over to the fire department use, where it will not be on a daily use, but it'll be a big benefit for the department. So that's a big plus overall. We're not just going to turn the equipment back in for a nickel on a dollar. That's all I have.
Thank you.
I just had a question, Supervisor.
Yes, Clerk Slater.
I noticed in the bid, Ben, maybe you can answer this on the Groundsmaster. It was dated January 20, and it says the pricing is firm for 30 days. Are they still going to honor that beyond?
Yes, they can still honor the price. They actually have to because of the state purchasing. They actually have to honor that price for a number of years, so it won't be an issue.
Thank you.
Move to approve the acquisition of these pieces of equipment.
Support.
By Shipley.
The motion by Trustee McDonald to approve resolution or item 23, 2021, supported by Trustee Kessel. All in favor, or Clerk Slater, we should do a roll call. Please call the roll.
Trustee Kessel,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Treasurer Pierce,
Yes.
Trustee Nordhook,
Yes.
Clerk Slater. Yes. Trustee Shipley,
Yes.
Supervisor Lesperance.
Yes. Motion carried. Item 24, 2021, server replacement. Mr. Swayze, an overview?
You guys are going to get to hear a lot from me tonight, so I apologize in advance. So this is another capital improvement project that we reviewed with the infrastructure committee. We have 2 servers that are scheduled to be replaced in 2021. One is our application server, which not only supports all of our documents, but primarily supports our BSNA suite of software. And then we have our local exchange server as well. So just want to talk real briefly about the BSNA server. There is no cloud solution for the BSNA server right now. The replacement cost of that is $15,700. So when we presented this to the infrastructure committee, we presented 2 options for our exchange server. an option, and you remember we had similar options when we talked about the replacement of our phone system as well. The first option was to basically continue with our local Exchange server, which means that we host all of our information on site on our server in our building. And that cost for that replacement was about $18,100. The other thing that we looked at was possibly going to a cloud-based Exchange server, which is really what the industry has been pushing. So we did in your packet, you have a financial review of that as well. And the financial review showed that we would have a cost savings of about $5,500 over a 4-year period for using a local Exchange server. So initially, that was a recommendation that we made to the Infrastructure Committee. The Infrastructure Committee did forward that to the Township Board for review. However, the day after the Infrastructure Committee, we got a notice along with most other municipalities in Michigan that there was a zero-day attack on local Exchange servers. And basically what a 0-day attack means is that there's a virus out there or a phishing effort or something where no known solution has been developed yet. So that 0-day attack happened on Thursday, and we updated our servers on Friday, or our IT provider did update our servers. But needless to say, it spooked them a little bit, and them being spooked us a little bit. While previously they were neutral on whether we should go with the cloud-based solution or the server-based solution, they are now telling us that we might want to consider going to a cloud-based solution earlier. And really, in talking to Brian Wilson, our Director of Inspections, and our de facto IT guy, what we'd really like to do is take a step back and review this again to see what probably is going to be the best solution for the township going forward. So what I'm asking for the board to do tonight is a little bit different than what the recommended action is. I'm asking that the board approve the replacement of the application server, but not take action on the local Exchange server tonight.
By the way, Ben, I just wanted to mention, I brought that topic up about malware and ransomware, et cetera, at the infrastructure meeting, as well as noting that this is the last version from Microsoft for local Exchange. They've been pushing everybody for the last decade to the cloud, and they've announced that this is the last go round of supporting local Exchange. So I think it's a good idea to, again, approve the BSA server, but step back on the Exchange server and reevaluate the cloud option. So with that, I make a motion that we approve the server as for BSA, the application server, and hold off and evaluate the Exchange server based upon the new information that's come out.
Second. So that's a motion by Trustee McDonald to approve the BSA application server only tonight, seconded by Trustee Shipley. Clerk Slater, please call the roll.
Commissioner Pierce,
Yes.
Trustee Shipley,
Yes.
Trustee Nordhook,
Yes.
Trustee Kessel,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Clerk Slater, yes. Supervisor Lesbrunz.
Yes, motion carried. Item 25, 2021, Kent County designated assessor interlocal agreement. And for this, I believe we've got Ms. Genter in our assessing department to walk us through this.
So it's at your pleasure, Supervisor Lesbrunz, if I can start out and then I can
Sure.
have Jen chime in. So keeping with the theme of the last item, I do want to let the board know that ultimately we are going to recommend as a staff that this item get tabled tonight. But I do think that it bodes well for us to kind of explain the process that we're going through and then why we want to actually have it tabled. So, but really the story behind this is that in late 2018, the state of Michigan legislature passed Public Act 660 of 2018. You'll hear it commonly referred to as property assessing reform, or at least if you're in the assessing world, you'll hear it commonly referred to as property assessing reform. So in the simplest framework, PA 660 really provided a statutory framework to ensure that all local jurisdictions have proper assessing in order to guarantee the highest quality assessments for taxpayers as well as the local units of government. And while there were a whole host of things that Public Act 660 did, and I included both the Public Act and a document from Treasury about what the act entailed, probably the most complex provision of it was the designated assessor. So currently the state of Michigan has an auditing process that all local units need to go through that have assessing department. It's called the State of Michigan Audit of Minimum Assessing Requirements. You'll hear us commonly refer to it as AMAR. So with the AMAR process, the statute provides for an initial AMAR, that audit that happens every 5 years, and a corrective action plan to be approved by the State Tax Commission if there is deficiencies that are discovered in the audit. Statute also provides for a follow-up review to be conducted once the approved action plan is in place. And then if after the follow-up review, the local unit remains in non-compliance, that is, they failed their initial audit, they got their what they had to do, and they failed again, they really have two options. One is that they can employ or contract a new assessor of record at the advanced or master level. So essentially, your old assessor is out, and you can bring in a new assessor that meets the qualifications, or you can contract with a designated assessor for the county to serve as the assessor of record. Then it should be noted that if you do not choose option one, if you do not employ a new assessor, the state will assign the designated assessor to you. So Kent County went through the RFP process to select a Kent County designated assessor as dictated by the act. And now what the act says is that the county has to enter an interlocal agreement with a majority of the local units. So once the agreement's finalized, once they get a majority of the local units to sign it, it gets sent to the State Tax Commission for final approval. And really the State Tax Commission is the one responsible for determining if the individual named as a designated assessor is capable of assuring they can achieve and maintain substantial compliance for any unit that contracts with them. So as I mentioned, I included a whole host of items in your packet, including the proposed interlocal agreement, the property assessing reform informational document from the state, the RFP that Kent County issued to select a designated assessor, and then a copy of the act as well. So through the RFP process, which was done with input from the Kent County Supervisors Association and the Kent County Assessor Association, the county selected Lori Spencer, doing business as Northeast Michigan Assessing LLC, as a county designated assessor. So Lori currently serves as the Equalization Director for Leewenau County, has 43 years of assessing administration experience. And then the initial term for the contract is 5 years. So this is the part where it gets a little dicey, and Jennifer can talk about this as well. But in my conversations with her, we think it's important for us to circle back with the other local units of government and see how they feel about this. So if the township were to use the services of the designated assessor, either voluntarily or as required by the state, the general cost is going to be $30 per parcel. That adds up to quite a bit of money for the township, over $280,000. So we would like to review the process that they went through a little bit more to see how the other communities feel about that. The reality of the situation is that a lot is going to have to go wrong in the township in order for us to have to consider contracting with the designated assessor. We've had 2 AMARs since I've been here. We've passed them with flying colors. The last one just this past December. Congratulations to Jen and her team for doing that. But I'd like to turn it over to Jen now, so she can just talk a little bit more about the concerns that she shared with me in reviewing this potential agreement.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Ben. When I saw the actual agreement, it was kind of a sticker shock to me to see $30 a parcel for the just the base, not including any of the other prices. And we were also one of the first municipalities to be given the actual contract. So not many of the other local units have received this yet. So there's not a lot of feedback yet from other people. I did get some feedback though from Newaygo County, because they also have one for their designated assessor, which is also high cost too. So this just may be what's happening because it's a limited thing and people are not all diving into this position. For Kent County, like Ben said, I mean, the need for us as Cascade to have these services is probably not very likely, but who's to say that it wouldn't happen? It could, and it's not, looking at those numbers for Cascade's best interest, it's not an affordable situation. That's more than what the assessing budget is right now. And so that just was kind of a shock to me at first, but so I just thought maybe we should look at, were there any other people who applied for this? Is this what the going rate is for all of this around the state of Michigan? In what other municipalities are thinking on this subject? I was in on the conversations before this all happened with 3 other assessors where our supervisors were discussing this. And so I think Laura Spencer is she is very well versed. She's a great candidate for it. It's not that she doesn't have, it's just the sticker shock of the numbers. So that's why I think we should table it for now and pump the brakes a little bit and get more information before signing off on this agreement. Not that I ever think you'll need it.
Thanks, Ms. Genter.
Jennifer, what happens, do you know, if 50% of the municipalities don't agree to it?
It's so from what I heard, from what I understood from Ben was that they needed the majority.
Oh, okay. And if they don't get it, then they can enforce it, or what? What happens?
Something's going to, I mean, the county was required to have somebody designated as of December of 2020. And so this is who they chose, and now they're going to get the contracts. So it may be that they fall back with our equalization department, which was what we as assessors of Kent County disagreed with, because we felt that it was an inequality of the balance of the system, where we have the assessment, then we have the equalization, and then we have the state services. And when you have equalization coming down into the assessment process, it takes out the equality of the system, where we've got equalization now doing the assessment administration. And so we felt that that was not in the best interest of the processes, and asked that our equalization for Kent County did not step into the role of the assessment for our personal county.
Well, based on your recommendation, I'd make a motion to table.
Support.
Don, did you have a question?
I just had a couple comments. Our township has really gone out of its way to provide quality assessment. And we've provided quality assessment assistance to other townships around us. My opinion is this is just the start of a money grab from larger government. So I agree with Ben and I agree with Jennifer. We need to step back, not 1 step, but 2 steps, and take a closer look at this monster that's coming at us. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other comments?
There's no discussion on a motion to table.
Motion to table by, was it trustee McDonald?
I second it. Yeah, Grace.
I did.
Jim forwarded it and supported it, and I made the motion and I seconded it.
Okay, thank you. So motion by trustee Kessel, supported by trustee McDonald to table item 25, 2021. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Genter. Item 26, 2021. This is for the 2021 local road improvements. Mr. Swayze, is this, I assume this is you?
This is me too. Thank you. So we go through this process each year. We budget general fund dollars to go towards the improvement of our local roads in the township. And this process is very important because For every dollar we budget for local roads, the Kent County Road Commission matches $1. So if we invest $100 in the roads, we get $200 worth of work, so on and so forth. So the process for identifying local roads for improvement typically begins in late winter and early spring, where we have a list of potential road improvements that's developed by the township staff and provided to the Kent County Road Commission for further investigation. So the initial list of roads that's compiled is developed utilizing resources such as our PASER ratings. So PASER ratings are included in your packet, and that's a way for us to assign a number value to the condition of our roads, basically 10 for excellent roads and 1 for completely failed roads to identify where work might need to be made. Those ratings are supplied by the Kent County Road Commission. We also consider complaints and requests that we get from township residents and businesses, and visual inspections that are done by our township staff as well. So the Kent County Road Commission takes the possible project list and provides recommendations to the township on maintenance and repair activities and cost estimates. The list is further reviewed by the township staff to figure out high priority projects and then considerations within the construct of the budgeted allocation for road repair. We then present that information to the infrastructure committee for feedback. Then ultimately it comes to the township board for approval. So we reviewed several areas that will need to be addressed in the next few years with complete mill and fill. If you've been following our local road program for the past 4 or 5 years, we've really focused on the complete mill and fill work. Really, that means that we take off the entire 3.5 inch depth of the asphalt and replace it. Because in previous years, we really have done all of the less intense fixes that you can do. You know, you can put an overlay on a road, but as you make those investments, the return on investment is less and less, and eventually gets to the point where you actually have to replace the whole road. And that's where we are with most of our roads in the township at this point. So we have spent a numerous amount of money over the past 3 years now to do full depth mill and fill projects in our township. So the areas that we've identified include several residential areas near Cascade Road in the northwest area of the township, as well as the Centennial Park business and residential area and the commercial industrial area of the foremost industrial plant, which is in and around 33rd and 36th Street. So I included in your packet the PASER map, as well as the proposed work orders for the 2021 Local Road Improvements Program. So we have 73.92 miles of local paved roads. Those include both neighborhood roads and section line roads. So these are the roads that the township typically contributes funding towards. And the Kent County Road Commission does do 2 to 3 miles per year of section line roads that the township does not contribute towards. In addition to the local paved road network, the township has 40.92 miles of primary roads. Those are federal aid eligible roads typically funded by the Kent County Road Commission. Those are going to be your big traffic roads. Those are going to be roads like Cascade Road, 28th Street, Craft Avenue, so on and so forth. And the Road Commission typically takes care of those at 100% as well. So of the 73.92 miles of local paved roads, we really divide them into 3 categories based on the PASER ratings. Before the kind of the blitzkrieg of work that we did in 2018, 2019, we had 10.9 miles of local roads that were good, 28.9 miles of local roads that are rated fair, and 34 miles of local roads that were rated poor. And if you look at that map, we've improved that dramatically. You can see that a majority of the road, though it might be a slight majority, is green now, which means it's in that good 8 to 10 rating. And that's a reflection of the money that we've been investing. So as I mentioned, there are several repair options. We're focused on the mill and fill, which is typically $300,000 per centerline mile. It goes all the way down to microsurfacing that comes up to be about $50,000 per centerline mile. Certain treatments are appropriate for certain road conditions. Roads that are in the good or fair category may be eligible for less intensive treatments, while the poor roads typically need the full depth mill and fill or similar work. And we already talked about the diminishing returns for some of those less intensive treatments. So we've identified 8.1 miles of roads that have been rated poor on the Pacer scale that we think that need to be addressed. So the cost of that work is approximately $3.5 million, and the township would be responsible for half of that. So after initial review with the Infrastructure and Personnel Finance Committee, the recommendations include for the 2021 proposed residential work is Beard Farm, as well as the Forest Shores, McNider, Galbraith, and Arbor Tree Streets, utilizing general fund budgeted allocation and general fund fund balance. So if you checked out the work orders, the total for that work is about $1 million, and our cost would be $500,000. So we have $400,000 budgeted. We would need to add an extra $100,000 for that. And then to complete the Centennial Park and Foremost Industrial Park, the First Finance and Personnel Committee has recommended utilizing bond proceeds, combination of general fund fund balance and bond proceeds, really both a combination of that fire station work that we talked about earlier and this work as well. That would be payable over 20 years. So we already talked about the cost, and I talked about the bond earlier in the fire station presentation. Again, recommending a bonding level somewhere between $4 and $6 million, depending on the final costs for both the projects. And based on those levels, the annual debt service can be expected to be somewhere between $270,000 and $400,000, and that debt service would be paid for through current revenues of the township. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the proposed local road work.
Shipley has a comment, of course.
Fine.
For the new people on the board, Ben and the township board have been very fortunate to actually have costs less than what we proposed. We've had extra mileage added on every year that we've completed with the money that we already allocated. So there's a consideration for you between Ben's working with the road commission and the road commission's efficiency with their contractors. We've really come out smelling like a rose for the past 2-3 years. That's all I have.
Thank you. Manager Swayze, I had a question from a resident about some of the plans for the section line roads that are in disrepair, like the rural portion of 28th Street, 36th Street. Do we have anything from the road commission or any news on those areas?
If you could hold on just a second. I'm sorry, I don't have that information with me right now, but what I can do, I know that there's about 2.5 miles of section line roads that they're planning on doing this year. What I can do is forward that to you. I'll forward it to all the board members, and you can share it with that resident that has that concern.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion made by Shipley to approve.
A second, Slater.
The motion by trustee Shipley to approve item 26, 2021 as written, seconded by clerk Slater. Clerk Slater, can you please call the roll?
Trustee Nordhook,
Yes.
trustee Shipley,
Yes.
trustee McDonald,
Yes.
trustee Kessel,
Yes,
treasurer Pierce,
Yes.
clerk Slater, yes, supervisor Lesbrunz.
Yes,
Thank
motion
you.
carried. Item 27, 2021, progressive AE agreement for station number 2 outbuilding. Manager Swayze.
Yep, so I'm going to review this as well. I'm going to skip the first half of the memo because it's just going to rehash what we talked about in the fire station presentation and really get to the agreement that we are proposing with progressive AE. So really the design build contract will have 3 phases. Phase 1 would be the final design and construction documents. So the proposed fee from progressive AE for that work is $27,500. And the second phase would be pre-construction bidding. And the proposed fee for that portion of the project would be $5,000. So the third phase would be the actual construction of the building. So as part of the design build contract, while Progressive serves as the general contractor on the project, they actually don't do any of the work. So they bid out all of the work to subcontractors. And the idea is that by going through that process, we can get the best possible price for each one of the trades that happens during the building construction. So for the construction phase, the progressive AE cost would be 6% of the construction value. And then also, because progressive AE serves as the general, they are paid for a lot of the costs that are associated with the project as well. They would typically go to the general. So those costs are estimated at $73,900, and they're included on the estimate that was included in your packet. But that number really would be finalized before the final bids are approved by the township. So the Public Safety Advisory Committee recommended the project from Progressive AE. As we talked about, including the general conditions and all of the work from Progressive that's proposed here, we're estimating the cost of that to be between $420,000 and $470,000. Again, that's the $113 a square foot, all the way up to $135 a square foot. And again, this would be included as part of the mix for the bond funding. So what I'm asking for tonight is for the township to approve the proposed agreement, authorize the design and bidding phase. So what will happen is that Progressive AE will go through the design, they'll go through the bidding. Once all that information is back, we go through the process again. So that goes to the Public Safety Advisory Committee to make sure they're comfortable with the bids that were received. And the township board has another bite at the apple to actually approve the construction of the project. So if the bids end up being higher than we want, there's an option to talk about some of that value engineering if we need to, that we talked about in the presentation. And then I also do not have the final review of the agreement language from legal counsel yet. So I'm asking that the board approve the contract, authorize the design and bidding phase based on final review and approval of the agreement language from our township legal counsel.
Any discussion or questions by the board?
No,
Yeah, I
really-
have a few questions.
Go ahead, Timmy.
Timmy does. I'm getting a lot of comment from the public about the cost of this storage building. Now I see we got about $70-some thousand in engineering on this. And maybe that's why it's getting up close to 500,000. But a lot of people in the township that I'm hearing from are not buying a $500,000 storage building. So just putting it out there, that support's around 250, 300, but it's not at 500.
So to be clear, it's not $70,000 in engineering. So again, those general requirements are things like, having the construction supervisor on staff, providing porta-johns, all of those things that are required as part of the project, but aren't necessarily being put into the building. So I wouldn't qualify it as $70,000 of engineering. Rather, those are the general conditions and the general requirements for the building.
That's fine. What I'm getting feedback on is the end cost pushing 500,000. That's where may have to cut back on the building to keep it down. So just putting it out there that the public support is not in that dollar range.
Well, but Timmy, how many people have you talked to? 20? I mean, there's 19,000 people in the township. I think we've been in an old building for 40 years. This is required for us to move forward with Fire Station 1. There's a big picture here. These are all tied together. The township hall having to move, this building having to be done to support Fire Station 1. It's part of a big picture, and it's part of something we have to do. And I don't want to cheap out and compromise the fire department and public safety in the process of replacing Fire Station 1. And then we're still going to need it overall at Fire Station 2 anyway for, it's more than just storage, and it's more than a pole barn. So I think the perception may be this is an expensive pole barn, and it's far more than that. And it's connected to so many more things. So I think the expenditure is reasonable. And I think Chief Major and the others and Progressive have really done their homework. And I don't doubt that this cost is a little bit expensive, but I don't think we're going to get any cheaper.
Manager Swayze, can you go over the two different, or maybe this is for Mr. Horman, the two different progressive entities? You've got one overseeing the other. Can you please describe that again?
Jim, is that something you're able to comment on?
Yeah, we have the architectural engineering firm does the design up front for the professional service fees. And then the Progressive SPR group is under and they perform the construction. So it's a result of insurance and other things that are required to do construction, but it's the same overall umbrella company.
Why, I'm not understanding what the benefit to Cascade by having both of those be under your.
Oh, it's just one company.
Who is overseeing who is overseeing Progressive AE within the township?
So in this case, it would be a team effort with myself and Chief Majors and the team that he puts together for the building project. But again, remember that Progressive actually isn't doing the construction work. So all of the work is actually being bid out to other individual contractors. And the idea behind that then is we use both our team, so Progressive is responsible for making sure that the individual subcontractors are performing the work. And then we're responsible for making sure that Progressive AE is performing the work that they're supposed to be performing.
Shipley has a question.
Go ahead,
Hey.
Trustee Shipley.
Ben, as I understand it, this is just the first step. And as we go along, we're going to be reviewing additional costs. Is that correct? We're not actually approving the construction of the building to start tomorrow.
So that's correct. As I mentioned through the process, there's another bite at the apple when we get all of those bids back. Because again, all we have right now is an estimate. But I guess my caution to the board isn't to think that, okay, this is going to come back and it's going to be a $300,000 building instead of a $400,000 building, a $450,000 building. If the township isn't comfortable with that price tag, we need to make sure that when we go to the bidding process, we're putting out there to those bidders a project that's most likely to return a cost that the township is comfortable with.
Correct. Thank you.
Do we need Progressive A&E involved in this? I know it's a fancy storage building, but is this something that we need this firm involved in?
We would not have the professional staff to do design or anything like a project like this. The township has just traditionally not had engineers and architects on staff, so we always use consultants to do this type of work.
Right, but it's an extra large fancy storage building for equipment. Do we need an architectural engineering firm for that? Because that's something that commercial contractors would generally have under their umbrella.
My opinion is yes, we need to have somebody that's working for us.
It's two people, the contractor plus the Progressive A&E.
Yes.
I have a comment.
Clerk Slater.
I think it's important to remember that we are ultimately going to need that space for our equipment. And maybe it seems, maybe it's a misnomer to call it a storage facility because now it's seeming like it's a glorified storage facility and it's too expensive, but we are going to eventually need that storage for our equipment. It's just that we have to build it first to do Station 1. So we are going to need it anyway. I always say, what's the first 200,000? It's what's a little bit more to do it right, because it has to be done eventually anyway. It's my opinion.
And did you say it was recommended by the Public Safety Advisory Committee?
I did, yes.
Who's on that committee that can speak to that?
Shipley is.
Was there concerns then, John?
The only concern was the total cost. we're pretty much aware of the procedure and the structure and the value of hiring somebody that knows what they're doing. You don't want John Shipley going out there, sticking a shovel in the ground and saying, this is good enough of a foundation. The overall cost we did discuss, but we also recognize that this is the first step, as Tom was saying, going down to that big picture and getting it done.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're all in favor of getting a storage facility, but we all know the difference between a Yugo and a Bentley. So
Right.
I'm just saying somewhere in between there is where we need to be. We do have to keep an eye on costs. That's my comment.
And
I'm
that's,
in favor of it, but
and Timmy, that's what I voiced earlier too. We need to just keep an eye on it from the
Yep.
design phase on and make sure that there isn't any unnecessary fluff. Don't forget that fluff makes a great insulation. So you do need some fluff, but not a lot of it.
yeah,
I agree with trustee Nordhook as far as overall agreeing that we need it. However, if we're trying to trim the fat, I noticed that in Progressive A's memo on this, they said they went back to the admin building that the township is about to move into, and they said that they completed that on time and on budget. But then when I looked back and looked at the minutes, and this was from before I was supervisor, the initial plan by Progressive AE, we spent $1.4 million on a building. Progressive AE performed the due diligence on that building, and it was almost move-in ready. Or the estimate on renovations was $550,000. Estimated time for completion was around July of this past summer. We're about to move into it, so it's just now being completed. So we're going on 8 months, and instead of $550,000, we are over $980,000. They, with a change order, and the reasons needed midway through were to take into account ADA compliance, Americans with disabilities. That wasn't thought of before. The number of office spaces, while Cascade's in the middle of a work from home program, flooring and generators. I just don't see how that wasn't anticipated in the $550,000. And now we're pushing $1 million on just that. That's almost twice as much. So it's just kind of funny that it's like the fox overseeing the hen house. I'm concerned about trimming the fat. And I think that if you're going to say we're on time and on budget on this most recent project, my concern is that's not true from when you look at the numbers, which we don't even have the final numbers yet. And I have real concerns about who oversees Progressive, because residents spend a lot of money in this township. We are fortunate. We have a huge tax base, but we owe it to residents to spend it constructively and efficiently. And I'm not seeing that necessarily right here. Not from the standpoint of not needed, it's from the standpoint of oversight.
agreed.
I just don't see us being reined in at all. I mean, this admin building, we're 2.4 million, and it's way over what Progressive estimated. And you're going to tell us that ADA compliance isn't a known factor when you're going in and giving an estimate? I mean, that's just someone's got to advocate for Cascade, and I don't see it.
I'll make a motion to approve the request to get it on the table for the design work that was mentioned, and review of the contract later to make sure it comes in close to this budget or below, and the review of the approval and agreement by legal counsel.
And just to clarify, we aren't approving the building itself at this point. We're just the design
Design work.
and pardon?
Yep.
Just the
Just the
design
design
work
work.
and getting the quote so we can see how much it's gonna cost.
Right.
Are we approving the process where Progressive AE is the middle person and at both levels of this? Is that within this approval?
We're just getting a quote.
Yeah,
On
but
the
how?
building.
What's the process? What's the method?
They are gonna do the quotes they're getting the quote and do the design work for the building.
So it's progressive AE at both levels.
It's Progressive
Yes.
A, as I understand, yes, Progressive A does the design. They go and get the bids, but we still have to approve them. So
How
we're
do we,
not,
how do we ensure that, like our admin building that we're about to move into, that they initially estimated at
but-
550,000?
but Grace,
Just a
we're
minute,
comparing,
just a minute, trustee McDonald. We're now pushing $1 million for the same amount of work.
but we're comparing
How do,
apples and
what's
oranges.
the oversight? What's the oversight process?
But we're not asking for the building to be built yet. All we're asking for is that them to come back with a quote.
Right, but
Then
it's
we have to-
progressive AE.
Then we have to approve it and then have the oversight.
So you're saying that it is necessary on this glorified storage building to involve this firm in the entire process? That's what this vote is for, correct? Would include?
It's for them to do the design and then to go get the quotes and come back to us and say, do we approve the quotes or not? Then it's up to us to monitor. Is it coming in close to the quotes?
Us who specifically within the township?
As Ben just pointed out, himself and Chief Majors and a team. Am I correct, Ben?
Correct.
Well, if there's a motion, I'll let someone else restate it because I won't be able to follow it closely.
You're up, Sue.
Mr. Kessel made a motion to review to hire Progressive AE, and we will review the contract later with approval of all stages of the process.
Well, and it includes their design and getting the contracted prices. And then we will review the bids for the work for the building before it starts.
Correct. We're not approving any bids now. We're just approving them getting bids.
We're approving them overseeing the process, correct?
Of designing the building and getting the bids. Yes.
And
Right.
being involved in the.
But
entire-
not doing the building yet.
No, they're
getting
just in, right, they're just in the middle, then we go get someone else to do the building. I understand.
Once,
Second.
yeah,
Can I add to that? I'm sorry, I don't want to step in line here. Ben, is it okay if I add detail to that?
I leave that up to Supervisor Lesperance.
Go ahead, Mr. Harmon.
The construction is managed and coordinated by Progressive AE. So all of the trade contractors who come in to perform, they are managed by our group. So the builder is Progressive AE, but all of the work is bid out so that it's competitive on every category with multiple bids, so that it's for your review and selection of those trade contractors with the team.
Why are we limiting ourselves to already giving it to Progressive AE? Why don't we just go to Rockford Construction and some other commercial developers who would do the same thing? I don't understand why we'd automatically pin ourselves to this when we've got plenty of other great commercial contractors who would be able to oversee the entire thing. Why start at this already? Why not ask Rockford to throw their hat and see if they can beat our price by a couple $100,000 or Progressive's price?
well, just to be clear, they couldn't bid by a couple $100,000 because this is only for the design and getting the bids, which is.
No,
what?
this is. That's
70,000.
the estimate. That's the estimate. No, that's the estimate of the cost. So
Right.
why are we limiting ourselves to Progressive AE right now off the bat? Why not go to some other commercial people? Progressive AE, we don't need this for a glorified storage building. Why don't we go to Rockford Construction? Make them compete against each other. This is not Fire Station 1. This is a storage building, admittedly fancier than normal. Why limit ourselves from the get-go to one company? Manager Swayze?
So that is part of the process. You know, Progressive AE goes out and gets those bids. So I don't anticipate that a Rockford Construction or a Wolverine is going to bid on a pre-engineered metal building. But when we get to the point where we're looking at Fire Station 1, I would absolutely anticipate that a Rockford or a Wolverine would bid on that project. It's just that Progressive AE serves as representative of the township to gather those bids and oversee the construction.
I wasn't impressed with the numbers in the admin building that we're about to move into when it's almost double the cost of the initial estimate. And then they say they're on time and on budget. that's not what we need in Cascade. It's not a good first impression.
Madam Supervisor, what you're asking for is not a Rockford construction to build it or to quote or to bid it. You're asking for a different design firm to come and design it, because that's what we need to go to a Rockford construction or somebody. We don't even have a
It's
design
not,
yet.
but Trustee McDonald, it's a heated storage building. This isn't a unique, this doesn't require, I don't think this is that special.
But a company to bid on it still needs specifications. They need schematics, they need electrical diagrams, they need wiring, they need architectural work.
They do that. That's what they do.
That's what I'm saying. What you're saying is what you want is a different architectural firm to come in and do the design.
We know what we need. We would ask then a construction firm to give us what we need. This isn't some special architectural design. This is a storage building. Trustee Nordhook?
I think what we're getting at here is we'd like someone to oversee who we pick to get the bids. And not have
Who
the
from
same
the
company.
who from the township oversaw Progressive AE in our current admin building that we're about to move into? Who were the people making sure that the fat was trimmed and that Progressive AE was staying lean on the admin building that we're about to move into, that started out at 550 and went over $1 million?
So that was my responsibility. But that bid did come back to the township board before we move forward. So we went through the same process. Their initial estimate was it was going to be $500,000. When those next estimates came back, I provided a document to the committee and then eventually the township as to why the costs were more expensive. I gave them the options to decide whether they wanted to go back to the drawing board or if they wanted to go forward with the cost as it was bid out. And the board chose to go with the cost as it was bid out. And that cost has been stuck to through the process.
Were you happy with the jump in price based on ADA compliance and numbers of offices? Manager Swayze, did you think that was a on time and on budget project?
So I was not happy with the initial cost price, but looking at the alternatives, I thought that it was a good investment for what we needed to do, and I did ultimately recommend to the township board that they do that work as it was estimated.
And Ben, as I understand it, those were costs that were discovered in the process that at some point we were going to have to pay anyway, whether it's now or 5 years down the road. And we just said, let's just bite the bullet and do it now, because it's going to be cheaper now than it's going to be in the future.
And to make the building as useful to the community and the staff as possible.
But the reasons listed were ADA compliance, American with Disabilities compliance. How is that? And flooring, we know we need flooring, generator, we know we need a generator, and number of offices, which yes, we will grow. But the issue is, do we not know that the building department is going to come back and we're going to be housed together? And at the same time, the township's in the middle of a work from home program. It's been crickets around the office. I just think we need a better oversight, but
Well, I think we better get back. I think this is a good topic, but probably we should get back on the fire station number 2 outbuilding, which is the topic that we really need to address. And if you're not comfortable, if a number of people aren't comfortable with using Progressive AE, then I think then our only option is to table this and determine if we want to get another a bid from another architectural firm.
Clerk
I have a
Slater?
question. Ben, didn't we get a RFP for the design work initially?
So when we started this process back with the facilities study, we went through the RFP process then to select the firm. So we put out that RFP. We had 4 respondents, and Progressive AE was selected from that pool.
Thank you.
Well, there's a motion. Tom, you supported it?
No, I did.
Well, Sue supported it.
Sue?
Yes.
We
Would you
need to
like me to
restate the
rephrase it?
motion. Why don't we restate it just to be safe?
Trustee Kessel made a motion to approve progressive AE agreement for Station 2 outbuilding. And we will review the contract and ensure that approval of the process is done at every point with the oversight of Ben and the committee.
Well, just so it's clear, I made the motion to approve the architectural design by AE, excuse me, and to go forward and get bids on the building, just to do that much, because that was recommended. And then also to review the, I don't know, I got my iPad going here and I lost it, but to review the contract as proposed by the attorney. Right, Ben? We don't have the final contract wording for this work yet, and you wanted to us make the approval contingent on the review of that contract, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so that is my motion, not to go forward with the building, but to do the design work and get the bids and review the contract. And then we make a decision when it comes back to us.
And I second.
Clerk Slater, please do the roll call.
Treasurer Pierce,
Yes.
Trustee Kessel,
Yes,
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Shipley,
Yes.
Trustee Nordhook,
Yes.
Clerk Slater, yes. Supervisor Lesbrunz.
No. Motion carried. Item 28, 2021. The Net Incorporated Metro Act right-of-way permit renewal. Mr. Swayze?
Great, thank you. So the Metro Act, also referred to as Public Act 48 of 2002, was enacted as a means to provide statewide oversight through the Michigan Public Service Commission and uniformity to permitted use of local public right-of-ways for telecommunication infrastructure. So we have received a Metro Act permit bilateral form renewal request from 123.net Inc. So the initial term of their unilateral request was 5 years in 2016. The bilateral form renewal would be 15 years. So typically the township receives in the neighborhood of $12,000 in Metro Act permit fees from the Michigan Public Service Commission. And we're required to use those funds for certain right-of-way maintenance activities. So I included in your packet a copy of the Metro Act permit bilateral form from 123.net and the liability insurance certificate and system map from 123.net. Since the passage of the Metro Act to provide uniformity to those applications for telecommunication providers, there's really little opportunity for the township to request modifications to the permit. So the state records indicate no issues with the company as a Metro permit entity. And we've also checked in with the Kent County Road Commission, who is responsible for permitting the actual work. And they indicate they've worked with 123.net in the past with no issues as well. So there's no expenditures related to the approval of the request, and granting the renewal will ensure the township continues to receive Metro Act monies from the state related to 123.net telecommunication infrastructure. With that, staff is recommending that the board approve the Metro Act right-of-way bilateral permit renewal request from 123.net and authorize the township manager to execute the agreement on behalf of the township.
Quickly makes a recommendation to approve and to allow the manager to act on the township's behalf.
Support by Nordhook.
A motion by trustee Shipley to approve and act and for the supervisor to act on the township's behalf for item 28, 2021, supported by trustee Nordhook. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next up, item 29, 2021. Appointments to the Planning Commission and the Grand Valley Metro Council. Planning Commissioner Lisa Creeder has recently submitted her resignation from the Planning Commission. And I know the rest of the board appreciate her service and the outstanding job she did. I'm recommending for appointment to the balance of her term, which ends December 31st, 2021, Ms. Wendy Corstange. Ms. Corstange, along with her husband and 4 children, is a 15-year resident of Cascade with a 25-year nursing career. Her professional experience includes extensive service on a variety of health-related boards and commissions, including the board of directors and also quality and process implementation and operations initiatives. Her deep appreciation of the unique character of the Cascade community, as well as her keen understanding and appreciation for the process, as well as her fresh perspective, will serve our planning commission well. And then as far as the Grand Valley Metro Council, I'm recommending myself to replace former Supervisor Bayan to the Grand Valley Metro Council.
I move to approve.
Support.
It's a motion by Trustee McDonald for appointments of Ms. Wendy Corstange to replace, or excuse me, to fulfill the resignated term of Ms. Creeder to the Planning Commission, as well as Supervisor Les Bruns to the Grand Valley Metro Council. Seconded by, was that Trustee Shipley?
Yep.
All those in favor? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 30, 2021. This is a resolution establishing a Citizens PFAS Advisory Committee. This resolution will establish a task and time-specific Citizens PFAS Advisory Committee to provide advisory commentary to the Township Board as this PFAS issue here in Cascade is addressed. As we all know, there is intense, ongoing, and increasing concern and interest right here in Cascade regarding the PFAS situation. This advisory committee will provide a structure for residents to facilitate communication between those residents impacted and the township leadership. Membership on this committee would consist of 1 member of the Board of Trustees, 1 member of the Planning Commission, and then 5 at-large members of the community who are owners and residents of the PFAS impacted neighborhoods. This advisory committee would be set up based on the regular appointment process that we have for all other advisory committees in the past, appointed by the supervisor and approved by this board. Specifically, this advisory committee then would be given the ability to participate in communications and discussions before decisions on remediation are decided. And that would also give them, residents, directly an opportunity to be heard before the township leadership makes those decisions that directly affect them. I believe that this will enhance the remediation process and also add additional transparency. Are there any questions or comments?
I have a question. Will any staff members be part of this to coordinate the meetings, take minutes, share those minutes with the board, et cetera?
I would assume that it happens. Typically, we always have a staff member that helps coordinate, but they wouldn't be appointed to the board themselves.
Okay, it just wasn't part of the resolution, so I wasn't certain.
Question, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me, Ben, if I'm wrong, we know the areas affected and the homes affected by PFAS. We had a map a couple of meetings ago that we reviewed. The design of the water mains to get water to those houses and correct that problem is underway. We've got some issues, I think, to resolve yet with the airport. We've talked about the funding for the PFAS or for the water mains can be done through the city of Grand Rapids, I think at a low rate for up to 30 years, I think is what you told us when we discussed it. Am I correct about everything I said so far?
All those items are correct, yes.
Then what would this committee do specifically that hasn't already been done by the board?
Those residents don't have a voice right now. And we're not jumping to the assumption that Cascade is going to assume the cost of remediation. Are we, Trustee Kessel?
No, I didn't say that, but until we get it resolved, we have to take care of the PFAS issue. So I think we are in an agreement that we got to do what we have to do to get water to those homes so that people aren't concerned about the drinking water. I know one of the ladies, I don't remember her name, brought that up at a board meeting a couple of meetings ago. But this committee wouldn't have any input as to what the township does with the airport. And I don't know, we haven't talked about that since the last meeting. Eagle and us and the airport were in discussions about their liability. But whether they're determined to be liable or not, we still have to take care of the water issue. So I'm trying to understand what this committee would do that we haven't already done or know we have to do.
So because Trustee Kessel, do you see no need to involve residents that are affected in this process? It's simply
Well,
an advisory. It's simply an advisor. It's a voice for residents to be part of this process. You don't see that as necessary?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what they're gonna provide. They're gonna, if I were a resident affected, I'd want the water brought to my house. I'd have, and how it happens is up to the township. I mean, we're gonna have to decide how to pay for it. They're not gonna pay for it. It's gonna be bonded for.
So we don't need to hear from them? Is that what you're saying? We're good?
Well,
I
I
don't
heard
understand what,
people
it's an
say that
advisory committee. It's a big deal. This is a huge project. This has been going on for years. We're nearing the end of of Eagle's investigation. As I recently learned, township leadership met quarterly with the airport, who are the ones responsible for putting this contamination in our drinking water. Quarterly meetings just to discuss the airport. Our township attorney, which I had to fight you, Trustee Kessel, tooth and nail, is Varnum. Varnum represents the airport. These residents have waited patiently for over 3 years. We are nearing the end of this process. I think it's appropriate to involve them because we've certainly taken lots of time to listen to the airport, and we've taken lots of time, and no one has questioned the fact that we have absolutely adverse interests with the airport, yet we share the same legal counsel, and the legal counsel is not showing up to our meetings. They're showing up to the airport's meetings.
Well,
They may not make the decisions, Ms. Trustee Kessel, but I think it's very important that we include them in the process, or at least act like we care about including them in the process. We ultimately represent the residents.
I know, but our main goal, and I think their main concern, is that they get drinking water that's not contaminated.
What do
And
we have to lose by asking them? Why would you not want to hear from
What do you
them?
want to ask them? I'm just asking, what would we ask
I get
them?
the sense that you don't want residents to be part of this process.
No,
And I
no,
don't understand why you would
You're
question
putting
that.
words into my mouth.
Well, I'm just
I'm
trying to figure out where you're
asking,
coming
what would
from.
they tell us, do you think?
Maybe that they would say, maybe we don't want the same attorney that's representing the airport.
No, I
because
don't
you
mean
disagree
that.
with that.
I mean, what about the water? I'm not talking about attorneys. We got a water, that's a PFAS issue. And we've got to get clean water to them.
Maybe who pays for that, what part, maybe just hearing what they have to say, because a lot of them spend a lot of money on reverse osmosis systems. I don't know, Trustee Kessel, that's what I'd like to hear from them. They're certainly important in the process.
And should
Trustee
we-
Nordhook?
Well, I think it'd be a good idea to have the people that are drinking the PFAS water have a little input. They might have a different perspective on how to get something done or do some legwork and help us. Right now, I haven't seen any legwork.
Shipley would
so-
like to make a comment, wear the UN blue helmet here for a minute.
Trustee Shipley?
PFAS is everywhere. We've got it coming down the river. It's not just from the airport. We have the industry called, the water heater industry up in,
Bradford White.
that's been dumping into the river. We have a slight amount of PFAS in city water coming out of Lake Michigan. We know that. So PFAS isn't just that neighborhood, it's everywhere. And I think that, first of all, if we're doing this committee, it's not going to slow down that process that Ben has worked on already to get fresh water there. But it is something that we're gonna have to live with for years, and we need to work with accordingly. It could pop up down in my neighborhood next year, and what's gonna be my solution? I live down on a private street with a well, so maybe some public input is needed here, looking down the road, not just at that subdivision.
Yeah,
All
and I
right,
think,
blue helmets off, go back to battle.
yeah, the point is, it's a public advisory board. It's great to get input. I make a move, we approve the public advisory board but I would like to make sure that we have a staff member as part of that, just to coordinate, to make sure that it's coordinated and the information gets back to us as to what they recommend.
That's a motion by trustee McDonald to approve the Citizen PFAS Advisory Committee, taking into account that there will be a staff member that attends the meetings and also records the important notes from those meetings, supported by, was that Treasurer Pierce?
Yes.
Sue Slater or Clerk Slater, can you please call the roll?
Sure. Trustee Kessel,
Yes,
trustee McDonald,
Yes,
treasurer Pierce,
Yes.
trustee Shipley,
Yes,
trustee Nordhook,
Yes.
clerk Slater, yes, supervisor Lesbrunz.
Yes. Motion carries. Next, Article 12, Manager Swayze, do you have any comments?
I believe I spoke enough tonight. Thank you.
we missed public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed public comments. Deputy Manager Fast, do we have any public comment?
Thank you Supervisor Lesbrunz. If anyone is joining us via telephone, please press *9 and I will unmute your microphone and give you an opportunity to speak. If I may, Madam Supervisor, we did have a couple of chat questions come in. Could I read those prior to taking in-person comments?
Sure, thank you.
The first question was from an anonymous attendee who says, how does the public find 300K okay, but not 500K? Why the line at 300K? Why not 200K or 100K? What's the approval process for each phase of the process going forward? And then the next question or comment was from Jennifer Paplava, who noted as a follow-up to trustee Nordhook's reference to public resistance to the fire department accessory building, does the township plan to communicate somehow separately to residents that the building is not just a pole barn, but requires the special finishing that Chief Majors described? That information probably isn't widely known, but may help residents understand why this building will cost more than expected.
Thank you.
And our first resident is Craig Merlin.
Welcome, Mr. Merlin. Please proceed.
Can you hear me now?
You can.
On the fire station, having been an attendee of the January meeting, I remember hearing that we wanted to complete the move of the admin building as soon as possible so that the demolition could start on fire station number 1. And that in fact, it was one of the highest priority projects of the township for 2021. Now, I am very disappointed to understand that Fire Station 2 is a prerequisite, or the Fire Station 2 pole barn is a prerequisite to the Fire Station 1 work moving at all. And therefore the comments made in January about immediate demolition and moving forward were not in fact accurate, and were in part, I would suggest misleading. Certainly Progressive knew 2 months ago that the sequencing was going to be necessary and that could have been raised. I now understand why the capital budget did not have Fire Station 1 in it until 2022, even though it was specified at that January meeting to be a 2021 priority. The second thing that I would like to comment on is that the contract, the Progressive people or person at the meeting talked about, well, the two companies are one. Well, in point of fact, they're not. They are two separate legal entities, and unless Progressive AE is guaranteeing the performance of that LLC, then there is in fact a liability shield between Progressive AE and the work of its design builder, which is the LLC. I hope Town Manager Swayze has done his due diligence on that LLC to know whether it has legal substance in the sense that there is in fact significant equity and resources in that LLC to sufficiently protect the township on this contract, and I suspect on the next contract, where it'll also be present, I suspect. I also would like to note that I haven't looked at the contract in any detail, but I did note that one of the changes suggested was that time was not of the essence. That it was important, but they crossed out time is of the essence in that contract. As a lawyer, I know what time is of the essence means. I don't know what time is important means. But if Fire Station 1 timetable is dependent on Fire Station 2 outbuilding being built, I would suggest the time is of the essence, and very much so. And I don't know who the comments on this contract came from. Was it the Council for Progressive AE or the LLC? Because this is a mishmash of progressive entities, and I agree wholeheartedly with Supervisor Lesperance that we need someone to watch the watchers. Because when you have a contract between Progressive, one affiliate, and Progressive, a second affiliate, to do the design build, the bids they're going to go out to get are the bids to do the subs on the actual contract to see whether it can be done. The design builder of this building and the person responsible for completing the building or the entity is Progressive SPR LLC, an entity I know nothing about, and I don't know whether anyone on this board knows anything about in terms of its substance. But you approved it.
Thank you, Mr. Merlin. And those questions, staff or someone within the township will look into those. Any other public comments?
There are no raised hands at this time, Supervisor Lesperance.
Okay. Manager comments, Mr. Swayze.
None tonight. Thank you, Supervisor Lesperance.
And Article 13, any board comments tonight? Treasurer Pierce?
Just as a afterthought on the administration building, seeing the renovation costs go from 500,000 plus up to $1 million seems like a big jump. I'd like to see an after action valuation of the difference between the two numbers. Just what quantify the differences and who is responsible for each one.
Thank you. I would second that. I think that's a great idea.
At least put it to bed on what happened. Something we can learn from.
Right. Trustee Shipley?
Yep. as always, I want to thank everybody that was out there, sat through this meeting. I appreciate their comments, including Mr. Merlin's comments. And secondly, for the record, I got here 3 minutes late. I arrived at 19:03. Thank you,
Thank
Sue.
you.
You were 12 minutes early.
Yeah, I know.
Trustee Kessel and trustee Nordhook then.
I just want to make a comment on the PFAS committee. I don't want it misconstrued that I was against it. I was trying to find out the purpose of it. I didn't understand from the memo the responsibilities of that committee. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
And I'm just trying to say that we really are trying to watch the pennies. Just gonna have some oversight. We were 100% off on the other one. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't happen with a $6 million fire station. I don't want a $12 million fire station because nobody's watching. And I don't want a $1 million glorified outbuilding because nobody's watching. That's all I'm saying. Is that it's not a blank check, and tell me when it's done. Somebody's going to be watching this time.
Clerk Slater.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe we ought to give that building a fancier name.
I like Bentley.
Shipley has one last comment.
Trustee Shipley.
This morning, as I was traveling along Thornapple River, I noticed that we once again have foam floating down the river. So to remind everybody from the Kent County Health Department 2 years ago, don't eat the foam. It has PFAS.
Thank you. I couldn't tell if it was a swan or foam in a few places.
The foam has PFAS, and the health department recommended nobody eat it.
You weren't gonna eat it, were you, John?
Oh, well, I was kind of hungry, but I passed it up.
All right. Any other comments?
I just want to say, I think Ken's got a great idea. I mean, Grace, you made some great points about why was this such an overrun? And we, we don't have really clear answers. We have some high nebulous answers. And I think what Ken is saying is we need to learn from this and figure out why. There might be legitimate reasons and there might not be. And I think this is really something that we were all struggling for. So whether it's good, right, wrong, or indifferent what happened, it's done. Let's figure out now why. So Ken, that's a great suggestion.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yes, agreed. Thank you.
With that, I move to adjourn.
Support.
The motion to adjourn by trustee McDonald, supported by trustee Shipley. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Nobody.